course, we're talking about race relations in this country, the fact that Donald Trump put out this conspiracy theory that the 75-year-old man who was pushed to the ground, has been in the hospital for 5 days, is somehow a member of Antifa, and somehow he might have been scanning the place with his phone. We had one of his friends on. Her name is Vicky Ross, and she said that is a complete and utter lie. The president wants to talk about fake news and complain about fake news. Maybe he shouldn't push out fake news of his own, like the fact that Joe Scarborough might be a murderer, or the fact that this 75-year-old man is a member of Antifa. That is what I call legitimate fake news. The number to call, 702-257-5396 is the number to call. And we have a lot of people who have been waiting very patiently on hold, so I want to get to as many as possible. Let's go to Adam. Adam, you're next up on the Vegas Take. Thanks for your patience. What's on your mind?
Hey, what's up, Adam?
Yeah, the problem I have with these BLM and Antifa is they don't have any centralized leadership speaking for them. They're making all these requests and everything,
That's a valid point.
Of activists.
Yeah.
All right, so let me respond to that.
It's very confusing.
Okay.
Let me respond to that, sir. First of all, I hate to put BLM and Antifa in the same sentence.
You have
Antifa, okay, let me just respond.
They're
Antifa,
similar. They don't have any central structure.
Okay, so Antifa, last I checked, is a group that only wants to cause havoc and violence. Last I checked, BLM, their group, if you go on their website, it does not stand for violence, and it does not stand for hurting innocent people.
But your problem is they commingle when they riot and they protest.
The FBI, okay, so the FBI put out a report, sir, with all due respect, the FBI put out a report that said there is no evidence to support the fact that Antifa is starting these riots and this type of violence. There are some incidences, just like there are incidents with white supremacists at some of these rallies. There are a number of different people that are causing havoc, that are causing crime. It is not Black Lives Matter fault.
Let me ask you a question, sir. How many people were killed by the police last year?
I do not know the exact number of people that were killed by the police last year.
1,000 people, okay? You're
okay.
speaking on stuff you don't even know. It's 1,000 people.
I'm speaking on stuff. Okay, so what have I said? Hold on a second. You just made a statement and said, excuse me. I answered your question. Now you're going to answer mine, okay? You just said, I speak about things I don't know, okay? What have I said in this show that is not factually accurate in the last 2.5 hours today, sir?
I know, you're doing 55 too, dude. I'm sorry, bro. Slow down.
Yeah, it sounds like you don't even know how to drive, and you're criticizing me. Why don't you learn how to drive first and go the speed limit before you kill somebody? You dope.
About 10 of them.
Do you just get pulled over, sir?
Yeah, why don't you go the speed limit first? Now, I'll ask you the question again, but why don't you pay attention to the road, you dope?
Crazy.
Okay, I'm now going to ask you a question. What have I said that is factually inaccurate in the last 2.5 hours of the show? Go.
Well, media, they report on stuff, and they don't even have any factual...
I didn't ask you about the media. I asked you about me. You just said I don't know what I'm talking about. Excuse me. Excuse me. I answered your question honestly. Now it's your chance to answer mine. You just said I don't know what I'm talking about. What have I said in this show? Excuse me. I'm going to ask you again for the 4th time. What have I said in the last 2.5 hours of this show that is not factually accurate?
Everything I just said to you.
Be specific and give me one example. What have I said in this show in the last 2.5 hours that is not factually accurate? That's the 6th time I've asked you. Please answer.
Your whole basis is not factual.
Your whole basis. Okay, can you be a little bit more specific than when you answer a question by saying your whole basis? Yeah. Hold on, I'm not done with this guy yet. I'll ask you now for a 7th time, and it's the last time I'm going to ask you because there are other people on hold that know how to drive.
I would love to hear 9 times,
okay?
Brad.
I'll ask you one more time, sir. Can you name me one thing that I've said in this show in the last 2.5 hours, and please be specific, that would lead you to believe that I don't know what I'm talking about and I'm not being factually accurate? Go.
Okay, in regards to Mr. Floyd and his autopsy, when he was killed, he had fentanyl. And
I haven't talked about his autopsy in the last 2.5 hours.
You talk about it every day.
What did I say today about his autopsy? What did I say? What did I say about his autopsy? That's not correct.
I'm guessing he hasn't listened to the show the last 2 hours.
Okay, what have I said about his autopsy?
Maybe listened to it yesterday.
What have I said about his autopsy that's not factually accurate? He had 2 autopsies.
About the lady, about how it's horrific.
You're changing the subject. You just brought up the autopsy. I spoke about the 2 autopsies that were done, one by the police and one by his family. What have I said that's not? Excuse me. What have I said that's not factually accurate about his autopsy?
I'm going to answer it.
Yeah, please do.
People focus on the family and the crime and the poverty issues. These issues will never be resolved.
Okay, well, you're an idiot because on Friday for 2 hours I was excuse me, you are. Why don't you learn how to drive? All right, goodbye. I'm done with you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There you go. There you go, buddy.
Very,
F you, he said.
Yeah, F you.
No.
The guy doesn't even know how to
very
drive.
good call, sir. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I'm sure you did, JD.
I think he was actually getting pulled over. Was he?
Probably. He's a moron.
I think he was.
I didn't even bring up the autopsy today. And by the way, I've been very consistent on the autopsy. There was one autopsy that claimed that he died from asphyxiation by the family, and there was another autopsy that said he did not die of that. So it's very, very simple.
Yeah, one said he had a heart attack. The other one was done by Michael Baden, who also did Epstein's autopsy, and he said that it was a homicide and that it was traumatic asphyxia. Actually, that call was pretty good to start because he made a very good point. When you don't have leaders speaking on behalf of Black Lives Matter, you don't know what their actual intentions are. Mm-hmm. So you only see what you see. The leaders I've seen have been those that have requested demands, that have taken over precincts, that are saying defund the police. I've only seen radical leaders of Black Lives Matter. I have not seen one reasonable leader of Black Lives Matter, and that does not help the overall perception of the organization on a national level. They need to get someone who is reasonable, who actually runs the entire operation at the top, who makes public appearances and doesn't sound like a complete socialist radical. And I haven't seen one of those people yet, Brian.
You talked about somebody that's reasonable, that has leadership qualities, yet you support Donald Trump. I'll move on to the next call. 702-257-5396. Let's go to Brian. Brian, you're next on the Vegas Take.
Hey, what's up, Brian?
Brian, go ahead. You're next on the Vegas Take. All right, we'll move on to the next caller. Here's a clue for you guys. We have about a 10-second delay. If you're calling in, turn your radio down. That's pretty much Listener 101 radio. 702-257-5396. Let's go to Lauren. Lauren, you're next. What's going on?
What's up, Lauren?
Yes, I just wanted to bring something to light. I'd like to give you some names. Ruth, Dare, and James. All three of these guys, Ruth killed 7 people. Dare killed 3 people and 1 cop. James killed 12 people and injured 70. I'd like to give you some other names. Floyd.
Okay, what is the point? Okay, so what is the point of listing names of people that have committed crimes? What does that have to do with what we're talking about?
No, I just want. Well, I don't know if Mr. Floyd committed a crime or not, or Mayor Rice committed a crime, or Freddie Gray committed a crime, or Garner committed a crime.
Okay, so what is the point?
While they were in police custody, Roof was taken. He killed 7 people in South Carolina.
And what does that have to do with George Floyd and racism?
What my point is if you're black, there's a good possibility that you might not even make it to jail. Okay? The first 3 names that I gave you were white guys. One even killed a cop. 2 of the guys were taken, or Ruth was taken on his way to jail after killing all the people in the church.
You're talking about the church, sir. Is that correct? The Dylan Roof? Is that the
Dylan
yeah.
Roof, that's correct.
Can I add something to that, sir? Because you bring up a good point. I'm sorry. I had trouble following you at the beginning. I apologize. So Dylan Roof was given Burger King moments after he killed how many people, African Americans in that church? Sir, he didn't. Sir, I bet you are aware of this. He didn't even have a scrape on his body.
That's correct.
Yeah, you're right.
And my point is, this happens all the time. These are not rare incidents.
Yeah.
You see white people going crazy with the police.
Right.
And for some reason, and I'm white.
Yeah.
But I also have biracial children.
Right.
So although I just see a double standard, and my point with
no, you're right. Can I add something to what you're saying and stay on the line, because you sound like a really smart guy. You know, the Black Lives Matter movement is not just all about officers killing African Americans. It's also about exactly what you are talking about, the mistreatment and the way they treat minorities as opposed to people who are white. And you brought up Dylan Roof. You brought up a couple other names. These are white people that had not a scratch on their body. What about the kid who shot 22 people at Walmart in El Paso, right? Right, sir?
Exactly. Yeah. Or the young man that was walking down the train tracks that had killed 2 people and kidnapped 1.
So I'm going to ask you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't in the case of the one that shot people at Walmart, obviously what he did was a heinous, horrible crime. But didn't he just kind of give himself up? He put his arms up in the air. I mean, he didn't. And didn't Dylan Root kind of the same thing happen there? When you just give yourself up to an officer, they're not going to attack you.
So
and like in the case in the case of George Floyd, he certainly, at least that's what that's what Thomas Lane's lawyer says, Earl Gray, that he apparently did resist. And when you resist, you're going to get those bruises, you're going to get those things on you. And when the culture suggests that, F the police or something along those lines, like NWA did back in the early 90s, which has done absolutely nothing for police relationships with young African-American men in particular. But when you have that culture of lack of compliance, you're going to be in a situation where you're much more likely to resist.
Tell that to the Flando Castillo family.
I totally agree that situation was completely ridiculous, and that was in Minneapolis. That's why there needs to be reform there. But you have to keep in mind, yes, Dylan Root and the shooter in El Paso, they did commit terrible crimes, but if they didn't resist, they're not going to be covered in any scratches or anything like that.
I appreciate the call, sir.
I just like to point out one thing. One,
sure.
I am a Trump supporter. Okay. Two, I normally agree with you, JD, but in this particular situation, I've seen it firsthand.
So have I, sir.
Okay, I've seen a complete difference. It doesn't matter if you yes sir, no sir, come out guns drawn. It just doesn't match with the way that I'm treated if I'm by myself, and if I have someone in my family, my immediate family in the car, is a totally different treatment.
Well, I can tell you this: I have been assaulted by 3 police officers, but I was in a situation I had no business being in. I was in a chokehold. I had to yell to my friend, please put that. I said, pull out your cell phone and videotape this. And the guy that put me in the chokehold, we were athletes at different high schools. So he was in high school. He was an athlete at one school. I was an athlete at a different school, and we had a bit of a rivalry. So that does take place, and it's not. I understand that that's happened to you, but that's happened to me as well. But again, I was in a place that I shouldn't have been in.
Okay, but I'll just point out, just because that's happened to you once or twice doesn't mean that African Americans or minorities are treated the same way you're treated when it comes to law enforcement. It happens to them far more than it happens.
I'm saying you need to hold people accountable for their actions and the decisions that they make as well.
Okay.
I find it extremely hard to believe, especially like your friend who we've discussed on the show multiple times. You look at Las Vegas. Las Vegas is a very, very diverse city. There is not a lot of racism here in general. There is a solid amount of Asian Americans, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Caucasian Americans. And I find it very hard to believe that your friend gets followed 12 times a year at a Walmart or a Target simply because of the color of his skin. Now, maybe in a place like Brunswick, Georgia, could that be taking place?
So here's the bottom
line. It could,
so,
but I don't even believe that.
Let me respond to that.
I'm not done yet. But if I'm at Walmart at 2:00 in the morning, and it's just me and 5 people, and I've got sandals on, and I've got shorts on, and I've got a white T-shirt on, and I'm just walking around aimlessly, I'm going to have someone come up and kind of follow me too, because the circumstances call for it. I find it very hard to believe that African Americans are getting followed in a place like Las Vegas at 3:00 in the afternoon in a full Walmart. I find it very hard to believe.
I know you said that 5 times. I get what you're saying.
Twice.
So here's my response to that. You can say you find it hard to believe until the cows come home. The bottom line is, you were born as a white man, and you don't know what it's like to be a minority or an African-American person in this country, period. End of conversation. By the way, I don't pretend that either. I listen to the minorities. I listen to my friends. I listen to what they have to say.
But it becomes an issue when it's an indictment on all police officers.
You just said, the problem is
that's the issue.
The problem is
when police officers are bad people, and defunding the police needs to happen because of how poorly all minorities are treated by police officers.
If you could please just let me finish. What I was going to say was I find it insulting that you're calling my friend a liar who is African-American, who has a very good job in this town, and you think he's lying when he says he's been treated a specific way. I find that to be very troubling. I want to get back to the phone calls. Let's do that. 702-257-5396. Jimmy, you're next on the Vegas Take.
Hey, what's up, Jimmy?
I have a question for you. I was listening to the news earlier, and they said that they're thinking of changing all these military bases' names. I guess they must have something to do with Confederate generals or something.
Yeah.
Should the Democrats change their name from because they were the Dixie Democrats, party of slavery years ago? Why don't they change their name and put their money where their mouth is?
Jimmy, is this a serious phone call?
That's a real phone call.
You think that the Democrats should change their name, and that's what's on your mind at a time where there's protests throughout the country.
It doesn't matter.
No, it does matter.
We're talking about changing all the names and getting rid of all the statues.
Okay, well, let me respond to that by saying this. Okay,
And Jimmy, you want to know something crazy?
let me
Gone
just-
with the Wind was just taken off of HBO Max last night.
There you go. That's definitely on tops on everybody's mind. All right,
That's
Jimmy.
a big. That,
no, you're
Brian,
right. It's much more important than police brutality.
An effort is being made right now to rewrite history.
All right, so
and you shouldn't rewrite history. You should learn from it.
Well, I have learned from history, and that's why I talk to minorities and I talk to people, and you don't think white privilege exists. I do. So, Jimmy, all the things that are going on in the world right now when it comes to race relations, when it comes to what happened to George Floyd, when it comes to, the election and conspiracy theories and November elections and all that stuff, the thing that is on your mind that you call into a talk show is you think the Democrats should change their name because you're a Republican. That's what's on your mind, and that's why you called in?
A lot of things are on my mind, but this is one of them. Do you care to discuss it or not? Or are you going to run away from it?
I'm not running away from it. I just think you're an idiot for bringing that up. I just think you are.
Now I'm an
no,
idiot. Now
yeah.
I'm an
Have a nice day, Jimmy. Have a nice day.
Jimmy, that was actually
have a
very
nice
good
day.
call.
Have a nice day, Jimmy.
Brian treated you extremely inappropriately.
No, Jimmy swore at us on the show before. He's done the same thing to Doug Basham, and he is a moron. 702-257-5396 is the number to call.
I think the Democrats should go back to either the Whig Party or the Bull Moose Party.
I think we're going to call them the Jimmies.
I think that would. It's time for a change. And let's go back to some of these great names.
A lot of conversation is being had right now about changing the name of every single college in the United States that is named after someone who owned slaves. The Robert E. Lee statue was removed from Richmond, Virginia. There's been 2 Christopher Columbus statues that were defaced in the last day. So there is a conscious effort right now taking place to kind of rewrite history. And I think that is very dangerous because then you don't learn from it. I think that learning from it and saying this is how far we've come since this happened, but it's still a part of the United States.
Well, I can tell you, me personally, if I saw a statue in this country of Adolf Hitler, I would probably want it taken down. And when you see some of these statues of those who supported slavery and owned slaves, I have no problem with them taking it down. No problem whatsoever. I wouldn't support an Adolf Hitler statue somewhere. I would want that taken down. And you know what? I would probably be okay with Jews taking down that statue as well. So I totally understand where African Americans are coming from. You can learn history in school. You can learn about who these people are. We don't need statues of them. Okay, I'll get a statue of Rocky Balboa in Philadelphia. That's okay.
These were statues from 200 years ago, Brian.
I don't care if it's 1,000 years ago.
Not from last week.
I don't care if it was
not
1,000.
a new statue. Again, rewriting history.
So you're okay with the statue of Adolf Hitler?
How does this have to? This has nothing to do with Hitler.
That happened hundreds of
years
years ago.
You're making a totally that was like
less than 100 years.
It was like
ago.
70 years ago.
Less
Brian.
than 100 years.
It wasn't
ago.
even 100
so,
years.
So where's your cutoff?
It's not even the same.
So where's your cutoff?
Not even remotely the same. That didn't happen in the United States.
So you're okay with statues and looking up to people with statues in this country that owned slaves. You have no problem, and you don't understand why that would offend some people.
I'm not looking. I'm just saying I think we should learn from history instead of rewriting it. Rewriting history can be very dangerous. And comparing Robert E. Lee to Adolf Hitler is not the same thing, Brian. And
How
again,
are we rewriting history?
They occurred because you're pretending like history didn't take place.
No, I'm not.
You're pretending like
no,
it didn't
I'm not.
happen.
Okay, so let me explain.
Like, for example, the Christopher Columbus statue, it was actually beheaded in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
The thought process behind that was because that statue represents genocide, Brian. That's why that statue was and you're fine with beheading a Christopher Columbus statue?
So let me respond to that.
To me, that's
to you. Let me respond. You asked me the question.
Yeah, to me.
Okay, so let me respond to me. You asked me that question. To anybody, it's not rewriting history. We all can learn about who these people were and the horrible things that they did in their careers, whether it is Christopher Columbus or whether it is any politician who owned slaves. It's not rewriting history. We can learn in school. We can read books. We can go on the internet. So my first point is you saying that we don't need to rewrite history makes zero sense at all. There's something called school, academia. There's something called books you could read. There's libraries out there, and you could teach your kids and you could teach your family. So that's number one. We're not rewriting history. Number two, again, I'm coming from a side of empathy here. There are African Americans in this country that feel like a certain way, and when you see statues of certain people that promoted slavery and owned black people, that's what slavery was, I would hope that you would understand that there are some people in society that would be offended by that. If I saw a statue, whether it was 500 years ago or Adolf Hitler, less than 100 years ago, if I saw a statue of somebody that oppressed my people, I would probably want it taken down also. It doesn't mean it's rewriting history. It means we don't want statues of these people in society, okay? It's one thing to have a statue, like I said, of Rocky Balboa in Philadelphia, or maybe one of the, maybe a George W. Bush statue, whatever the case may be, or a Jimmy Carter statue, or a Ronald Reagan statue. It's another thing to have a statue of somebody that oppressed minorities for years and owned black people. It is empathy, and it is understanding where those people are coming from. Now, there's a difference between putting graffiti on one of those statues and then burning down a local business. There's a fine line there. All I'm simply saying is I understand where these people are coming from, and these people should not be looked up to as heroes. You could learn about history without having to have a statue to tell you about it. It's very simple.
Okay, what about Niall Kinnick? Niall Kinnick was the only Heisman Trophy winner ever at the University of Iowa. The stadium is named after him. He was killed. He felt so strongly about being involved in the military that after his last year of playing football, instead of going pro, he decided to join the military. And he was killed in an airplane flying over Germany. That statue and the entire stadium was vandalized in Iowa City 3 days ago.
Okay, so what does that have to do with the statues that I was just talking about?
Is that okay, though?
That's a completely different subject.
What I'm saying is, why would you? Robert E. Lee. I get Robert E. Lee. I get the Confederate.
That's what we're talking about.
I get the Confederate flag not being in it. Where the Confederate flag, in my opinion, should not be allowed.
Why are you
anywhere.
bringing up somebody else that had nothing to do with slavery?
But like Christopher Columbus, you're making that very weak association of Christopher Columbus with genocide, for example. Christopher Columbus, by all accounts, founded the United States, right? So why is it okay to destroy a statue of Christopher Columbus? Why should we have to rename every single college of someone that may or may not have owned a slave at some point?
Okay,
Brian,
so
slavery has been a thing. Slavery has been a thing for thousands of years.
So let's just let people who own slaves.
No, there have been a lot of different people that know. That's why I'm saying.
Because it happened 1,000 years ago, that makes it okay?
It shows how far we've come from that. That's the whole point.
Then why should we have these statues?
It represents how far we've come from that.
So so that's according to. Okay, hold on.
That is the absolute truth.
Okay, to you.
That's what it does.
Okay, you got to let me respond.
That's what it does.
You got to let me respond. Your definition of these statues and these people that own slaves as a white person, your definition of it, well, it shows how far we came. But guess what? To minorities and African Americans, they don't have the same definition that you have. And you know what? I am going to take their definition over yours because they are black and these people owned slaves. Now, if you think it's a symbol of how far we've come, well, if we've come that far,
which it is.
Well, if we've come that far, then maybe we wouldn't have protests all across the country.
We're having protests all over the country because police brutality is the start of it. What it really is an attempted power grab on the United States, and that's why.
Speak for all the minorities in this
that's why
now.
what's happening in Seattle is taking place. That's why what's happening in Minneapolis is taking place. This really is a potential insurrection from turning the United States from a capitalist country into a socialist or a communist country.
Well, that's
Brian.
absurd.
No, that's not absurd. Look at what's taking place. We are seeing the start of a potential cultural revolution that is attempting to rewrite the history of the United States.
There's nobody.
No, we are. We're watching.
Nobody that is trying to rewrite history. In fact,
we
it's
are,
the
we
opposite.
Are, then why did HBO Max take away what is considered a not you say Gone with the Wind? Gone with the Wind, 1939. It was an absolute classic. There are very few people who are into movies.
Okay, I agree with you. We're rewriting history
who
because
say it's
we
not
won't
a
see
classic.
Gone with the Wind. I agree.
Also, Gone with the Wind was the first movie ever to have an African-American win an Oscar. Hattie McDaniel won the Oscar in that particular
I'm sure
movie.
that's what's on every African-American's mind right now.
Well, I'm saying,
no,
Brian,
I agree with you.
We're
rewriting history because we won't see Gone with the Wind. I agree.
It's been taken off HBO Max because of the racial injustices that had to do with the death of George Floyd.
And that bothers you. That really gets
the problem with George Floyd. No, I think it starts a floodgate of other things. I think it starts a floodgate of potential censorship, like what took place potentially in Nazi Germany, where where books were burned, where the history was kind of rewritten. I hope the same thing doesn't take place here, and that's why I understand that Robert E. Lee did own slaves. He was a Confederate general, and that could offend a lot of people, but that doesn't change the fact that we've come a long, long way since the Robert E. Lee days, and we shouldn't just try to erase history. We should absolutely appreciate the fact that we have learned from it, and we'll continue to learn from it.
Again, as I said before, and I'll say it again, there's nobody that's trying to erase history. You equate taking down a statue of an evil human being that owned black people to erasing history, and I remind you once again that nobody is doing that. Actually, there's school and education and books that you can read to remind you of history of who these people are. It doesn't mean that we need a statue, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we are erasing history.
Brian, did George Washington own slaves?
We got it. I don't have enough time to answer that.
I believe he did.
Okay, I don't have enough time to answer that. But hey, I made my opinion clear. You guys out there listening could make your decisions. I have absolutely no problem with minorities that are taking down statues of those who owned slaves. I have no problem with that whatsoever.